This show is sponsored by Panini America, the makers of the most collectible sports cards on the planet. Visit PaniniAmerica.net to start collecting your favorite college and NFL stars. The Luminance series has NIL autographs from guys like, Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers, people in the college football playoff. There's also Jalen Milroe. There's also DJ Lagway. Ari, we ripped open a box in Nashville yesterday, and this was the one that you won from me in the Colorado-Kansas bet. You got a Cooper DeJean autograph.
Yeah, guy sells. Also got a numbered Marvin Harrison Jr. rookie card. I got a Roman Wilson auto. It was a nice little rip, and it felt better because it came from you. I'm also sending a few of these cards out to PSA today that are pretty big. I got this here. This is a Patrick Mahomes cracked ice. We have a Jordan Addison red, white, and blue mojo to 13 out of Contenders Optic, and we have a gold Dalton Kincaid. So we got some we got some hooks in the hobby. Really enjoy doing it, and happy that Panini's here because it's my favorite thing in the world.
Justin Herbert, good as gold, autographed uniform swatch. There's a little Chargers blue on a uniform swatch too. So yeah, it is so much fun. I am enjoying this
multicolor patch right there. You got, and if you ever want me to have that, I'm around the corner. So just let me know.
Yeah, no, I think I'm gonna keep that one, and you keep yours from PaniniAmerica.net. Go to PaniniAmerica.net and start collecting today. Let's do the show. Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3, presented by Wendy's. Ari, the diehards know we've had some issues today. StreamYard, the app we use to deliver us live onto YouTube and onto X, was not letting our beautiful audio come through. They were showing our faces, which I don't think anybody actually wants to see, but not letting anybody hear our voices, which I'm not sure anybody wants to hear, but I think they'd rather hear us than see us.
Yeah. Beautiful voices is probably the right way to put it, because it's certainly not the faces. But hey, you know what? This is the wonderful thing with technology, right? Like, it opens up our world and allows us to do things unimaginable 20 years ago, but at the same time, when it messes up, it's the most infuriating and terrible thing in the world. So we're doing our best. We're going to be here, and we're going to pin this on me.
Not your fault. We need to change. Well, we'll probably have to change the graphic, because this is definitely not Ari's fault. 100% not Ari's fault. But that's that's the only mic graphic I have at my disposal right now, and I'm just trying to work through it. The frustration level is high. Like,
it's funny because when it was happening, everybody in the chat was blaming me. So you've trained the audience.
Trained them well.
If there's a technical issue, especially as it pertains to hearing us, it's probably my fault. You know what? That's a burden I'm going to have to shoulder, because I actually have had 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 too many issues with this stuff. So, but I'm excited that
I can at least hear you. Beautiful microphone you're talking into right now, though.
Yeah, all you have to do is come to Dallas and fix all of the ails in my life. That's how my wife feels about Andy, and that's how the audience should feel about him too. Thank you so much for doing all these things. And you know what? It's the thing about life. We're still going to do a show. The show must go on. It's not live. We're sorry about that, but this should be on YouTube here shortly, and you guys can enjoy the show that way.
What's funny is we're going to talk about Bill Belichick, and he's going to either take the North Carolina job or not take the North Carolina job at some point during the conversation. We're going to talk about the transfer portal, and there's going to be like 100 more people in the portal than when we recorded. Although we just got a notification from Hayes Fawcett, the great Hayes Fawcett. Williams Nwaneri, who was the #1 D-line recruit in the country in the class of 2024, is transferring out of Missouri, all 4 years of eligibility intact.
That's going to be a big ticket item, I think. You know what's funny? And it's just like, maybe it's the time of year, maybe it's just the reality of college football these days, but like how the news cycle changed with newspapers, and how like people didn't want their news the following day because things were so, it's like, how do people do podcasts that were pre-recorded back in the day? Like, it's like, now we're not live and we've got to go through an hour-long show, terrified that we're going to be outdated by the time it goes up like that. So like the news cycle for podcasting now is live or don't do it. Like, is that where we're at with technology? Pretty soon we're going to have to be able to tell the future before
we can be evergreen. Well, yeah. We'll just do the Gerald Ford Dead Today at 83 Saturday Night Live sketch where they pretend to be Tom Brokaw and just pre-tape the headlines. And that's really all you can do.
I guess we could also just like do this in a way where we talk through the Belichick thing, and if he doesn't take the job or he does, it works both ways. Just like we are doing this before we know what happens, but we're going to have a discussion about North Carolina, Bill Belichick, whether that specific thing makes sense. But I think we can have a discussion in a way that, makes you question or wonder about certain types of hires everywhere, and still make it interesting. So let's try to do it that way.
Thing may also stretch out, Ari. That's the thing. There may not, we're only talking about like an hour delay before our show goes up. There may not be a resolution to it because this is complicated. This is more complicated than I think people realize, because there's a power struggle going on at North Carolina that has been going on for a while, and it is manifesting itself in this coaching search. Basically, you've got a board of trustees chair who does not like the athletic director. Like, he tried to kneecap Bubba Cunningham. John Pryor is the name of the board of trustees chair. He tried to kneecap Bubba Cunningham in May because he wanted to see more detailed financials from the athletic department. And so remember that it was right as ACC spring meetings started, he gave an interview with Inside Carolina that essentially just ripped Bubba Cunningham. And now you're seeing this situation where he did not agree with the handling of the firing of Mac Brown. And now this is sort of spilling out into, this is my preferred candidate. This is my preferred candidate. And it's really interesting because if you want to kneecap your AD, one way to do it is to make everybody think you're going to get Bill Belichick, and then maybe you don't.
Yeah, it's college athletics gets dirty, man. Like we've seen some weird stuff happen at Auburn in the past. Like we're seeing this now. Like it's just it's a dirty game. And the funniest thing about it is that everybody who usually is involved in these types of things wants the same result, But I also think that dysfunction like this leads to it becoming harder to be good or to be successful. So we'll see how this all pans out. But on the surface, the Bill Belichick rumors, smoke, whatever you want to call it, are interesting at the very least.
Absolutely. Because this is the guy that I would assume most people consider the greatest football coach of all time. Like, we say Nick Saban's the greatest college coach of all time, and I don't think there's any debate about that. But Bill Belichick won 6 Super Bowls as a head coach, 2 as a defensive coordinator with the Giants. Nobody's been able to do anything like that because it's a league designed for equity. Nobody's supposed to win that much. And he figured out how. Now, you can argue that it was Tom Brady. I think it was probably a combination of both. But the idea that this person could jump into college football is very intriguing. But he's also 72 years old.
I just Googled greatest football coach of all time. AI helped me out with this.
Okay.
Bill Belichick is number 2 on the list. If you do the AI
Vince Lombardi?
Don Shula came up.
Oh, John Shula. Well, he
came up.
Yeah.
Bobby
Shula
Bowden.
has the NFL wins record that Bill Belichick is chasing, and that's a piece of this discussion.
Yeah. The AI thing is going to take over the world. We can have a podcast about that in March. But coaches from the Google came up. Bill Belichick was number 1. Nick Saban was 2. You had Vince Lombardi, John Madden, Tom Landry, Don Shula, Bill Parcells, Andy Reid, and Bill Walsh. Those were when you type it in, that's what comes up.
I think the AI, I would like to hear the AI's case for Shula. He does have the most all-time wins, but nowhere near the number of Super Bowls.
With 347 wins, Shula holds the NFL record for most wins. He also won won 2 Super Bowls and was named Coach of the Year 4 times. That's what AI said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bill Belichick won 6. So,
I mean, argue with the robots, pal.
I know. Bill Belichick had to do it when there was free agency, and Bill Belichick had to do it when the draft was 7 rounds and not 12. And this is.
You want context and reason from the robots? Is that what you want?
No, I actually don't want. I really don't want the robots to learn context and reason, because that's when they put us out of a job.
Then we're done. Not out of a job, out of the world. Like
that's right.
You know, I'm not a big sci-fi guy, but those movies tend to also all end the same way. And the thing I don't understand about it, real quick, is that we are trying our best to make all those horror sci-fi movies come true.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want them to have reason. We don't want them to be smart. Like we're doing it. Like I feel like humans are doing it.
Yes.
Is it kind of scary?
It's like nobody watched Terminator or Terminator 2. Maybe it's your fault because you don't like those movies. Like, it's people like you who haven't watched Terminator 2 who don't know how this ends.
I guess it's true. It is kind of my fault because if I have seen Terminators, by the way. There's a line.
Okay.
I've seen those movies and they're badass.
Okay.
Yeah, but if more people watch the Terminator, then maybe they would stop trying to get AI to be smarter than us.
Well, it's not smarter yet, because if it was, it would say Bill Belichick is the greatest football coach of all time. The question is whether Bill Belichick is going to come coach in college. Now, he went on Pat McAfee's show yesterday, and he sounded like a man who's very interested in this job, but either hasn't been offered it or hasn't decided he would accept it, because there was a lot of if I did this, if I did this, if I did this. But he sounded like he had a plan if he did this.
It didn't sound like a gimmick to me. Like he did research and understood. And like, listen, you don't become a coach that's in the conversation for greatest coach of all time without having an understanding of how it works at other levels too, right? Because you learn from other levels. The NFL has learned a lot from college and vice versa. Like you're in the world, you're around coaches all the time. You know how the world works. The question is whether or not it makes sense. Now, we had a discussion about this yesterday in Nashville when we were together. But my thought that scares me, before we get into all the positives of what this could bring, is that we have seen coaching hires of similar ilk in the past that have not worked out well. Now, that said, those similar coaching hires in the past weren't the greatest coach of all time or a coach that created an NFL dynasty, which is, I think, inarguably harder than doing it in college because of the talent discrepancy and the lack thereof. But retread hires is the word I'm going to use. Coaching names that have big splashes that everybody gets excited about, but then when you actually get 2 or 3 years into the tenure, there's not much substance behind. Herm Edwards comes to mind. Charlie Weiss comes to mind. Les Miles comes to mind. It's not always NFL to college. It's just big names that have accomplished stuff in their careers that are on the downturn of both career and age. You
mentioned the Kevin Sumlin Arizona tenure when we were talking about that too.
It's like Kevin Sumlin got hired at Arizona because Arizona's administration wanted to trick people in Tucson into thinking they did something because he has a recognizable name. And like Bill Belichick is the absolute like supercharged version of those things because he's Bill Belichick, right? Like, so the thing that scares me is if you're 72 years old and you're firing a coach that you're that's basically the same age, in part because A, he hadn't gotten it done, but B, is getting up there in age. It just seems like a bizarre move. But then on the other hand, when you start breaking down the positives of it, like this could be different too. So like I think that you and I both were, amused by the report last week because we didn't think this actually could come true. But now that it seems like there's more traction to this and that like by the end of Tuesday, it's like within the realm of possibility that he could be named their coach. You actually do have to start to break it down and think, well, okay, maybe this isn't just a retread hire. Maybe there's something to it that he could bring to the table that those guys in the past couldn't.
Well, one of the things that he's pointed out is watching his son Steve work as the Washington defensive coordinator under Jed Fish. He's seen his system implemented in college now. Because I think one concern is, could Bill Belichick's defense be translated to college students who have to go to class, who are not full-time employees, who are not in the building all day, every day, although we kind of know that that's not entirely true. They are basically employees. They are in the building all day, every day. And if you watch the Huskies this year, it looked like they picked up the defense. It was not a great year for them, but we didn't expect it to be a great year for them because it was a complete rebuild after the whole roster was gone. So he's seen that now. So there's a little proof of concept there. But I also wonder, is this Bill Belichick just reminding the folks in the NFL who did not hire him last year, did not hire him in last cycle? I'm here. I'm Bill Belichick, for God's sake. What are you guys doing? Give me a job. And, we are less than 12 hours removed from an absolute disaster piece by the Dallas Cowboys, where basically, and look, it's probably not Mike McCarthy's fault that a guy who just got called up off the practice squad tried to touch a blocked punt and it went through his hands and the Bengals recovered. But it doesn't help Mike McCarthy. And
you know what it does help?
Bill Belichick.
My fantasy team, who got into the playoffs because of the Jamar Chase touchdown reception at the end of the game. So thank you very much for that. Hey, but Andy, so here's the question I have, and I don't follow the NFL like I watch it as a fan, but I don't follow the reporting.
We don't cover it. Yeah,
we don't cover it. A large part of what drove Bill Belichick, I think, during his time in the NFL, and I was kind of looking this up last night because he even was like a quasi GM for the Browns 20 years ago or 30 years ago, whatever it was, is the personnel piece to it. And I think that the thing that you would question with Bill Belichick as an NFL franchise, I don't know if this is right or wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think Bill Belichick doesn't just want a head coaching job. He also wants to be in charge of personnel too, right?
I think you're exactly right.
And if that's what's holding people up, I can understand that, especially considering the fact that things didn't end on a great note in New England. So, like the college piece, if like making and building and molding your team is what he loves, which might be the thing that drives him, being a college coach allows him to do that. He can pick his pieces. He can figure out how to allocate NIL and revenue share money when the time comes. He can try to mold the roster into what he thinks it should look like in order to win that way. And I don't know if that opportunity is going to be available in the NFL to him. So that's a secondary way of looking at this, because if assembling the rosters is much fills his love tank as much as actually coaching the players on the team, then college might just be his best option at this point.
That's true. And the thing is, like, if you have a traditional NFL power structure where you have a GM who makes the football personnel decisions and then the coach makes the football X's and O's decisions, the front office people don't want you to hire Bill Belichick because they know ultimately if he's successful, he's going to fire them.
Which is why I don't understand the Dallas Cowboys stuff. Like,
here's why. Here's why the Cowboys are different. Because Jerry and Stephen Jones run personnel for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
They ain't firing themselves.
Right. So that's why it doesn't make any sense.
But they could bring in Bill Belichick to coach the team, and Bill could make suggestions about personnel all he wants, but they're the owners. And remember, that's what Bill Parcells did with them. And they managed it with Parcells till they didn't. But that would probably be the only situation where the personnel decision makers would not be scared of Bill Belichick.
Yeah, no, there's no question. And it would be dysfunctional, I think. So I don't know.
Highly and highly entertaining too. But to your point.
But I don't know that would be attractive to Bill Belichick at all anyway. Like, I think he wants to go to a place knowing that he's king shit, right? Like, he doesn't want to go in there and listen to and also too, again, rudimentary understanding of the NFL, because I don't cover it the way I do with college football. But like, haven't the Cowboys been pretty terrible at their personnel decisions? Isn't that part of the reason why they've been bad for the most part?
But Jerry ain't firing himself, and that's the difference.
As I drink my Diet Dr. Pepper I got out of a Dallas gas station that says Cowboys on it.
Exactly. Yeah, Jerry runs your town, but yeah, Jerry's not firing himself, even if he made not the best decision in the whole wide world, re-signing Dak, re-signing CeeDee Lamb. Really, you could have just re-signed Micah Parsons, redone the offense, and you probably wouldn't be in cap hell.
And isn't there like a concern that they're going to lose Parsons, who would be the last of those three that I would want to lose?
I don't think they're going to lose him, but
Okay.
I think so. But yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's just a strange situation, and I think you're right about the college piece of it, where he could come in, he would be the king, he'd be able to do what he wants. Like he's got a podcast now. Did you know that we have to compete with Bill Belichick here in the podcast space?
I mean, the guy's an electric personality, so sometimes you just have to lay your sword down and accept taking an L.
So I listened to some episodes of that podcast. Yeah, and it was very interesting to me because he does it with Mike Lombardi, who's a former NFL GM. He was the GM of the Browns, and he did a lot of personnel work with Bill Belichick over the years. And with Matt Patricia, former head coach of the Lions, but who always was on the Bill Belichick staffs before that. And then famously was a defensive coordinator who became the offensive coordinator in a pretty much disastrous season. Matt Patricia is a really good, natural sounding podcast host.
Yeah.
Really good.
How was the content?
It's good because these guys know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so when they're breaking down NFL teams, they understand, very clearly. And I think they translate it very well. What I think he would do at North Carolina is it'd probably be a getting the band back together situation. Mike Lombardi's your GM. Matt Patricia's maybe your DC. Is Joe Judge working right now? Could he be your special teams coordinator? He's looked at college jobs throughout the years. He almost became Mississippi State's head coach at one point. So, that's my question is you could probably do whatever you want in college because you're Bill Belichick.
Okay.
At this point, I don't know if you can do that in the NFL, even though you're Bill Belichick.
Yeah. So let's talk about it from the college aspect then, because this is a college football podcast. Is making a program that's just the NFLcation of an ACC school a sellable and good plan to you?
Do you think that Jed Fish's plan at Washington is a good plan? Because this is simply a Belichickized version of that, which, by the way, Jed Fish probably got advice from Bill Belichick before he became a head coach at Arizona the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I do think that it's a good plan, what Jed did at Washington, to hire a bunch of people, including Bill Belichick's son, in order to, have that NFL college program, right? They tell that to people. They want you to know that when you go to Washington, you will be in a NFL-like system designed solely to help develop players to the next level. So, that's it. But it's also like NFL by proxy. And I know that Jed spent time in the NFL, but getting the actual person that like it's different between saying, hey, I used to work with Bill Belichick and this is his son. And, we know how it works in the NFL, and then actually just being Bill Belichick. Right. Going to that. But I think the question that I really have here, Andy, more than anything is that do you think North Carolina, a team that played in the ACC championship game 2 years ago, is at a place where it needs to, bend over in a way, or contort its body in a way to just be so different that it tries something? It takes a home run swing. I said this to you yesterday, and I think it kind of struck a nerve, but I want to say it on the show because it's good podcasting, but it felt or feels kind of gimmicky to me. Do you think that's an unfair categorization of this? And do you think that North Carolina needs to do something like this in order to be competitive?
I don't think they have to do something like this. But I also think the way this search has unfolded, that they've eliminated a lot of candidates who probably would have considered this job or would have taken this job. John Sumrall has said he's going back to Tulane. And if this hadn't been such a ham-fisted search, I would imagine he'd have listened to them. Matt Campbell, I don't think even wanted to listen to them had it not been such a, messed up search. I would imagine he would have at least listened. He'd be great for the job. I don't know if he would take it. He seems like he's got a pretty good situation at Iowa State now, but that's a hard job. I think North Carolina is probably an easier job than Iowa State. But he's also smart enough to know I'm aligned with my AD. Things are working. There's not somebody trying to get my AD fired. I think things could go pretty well here, rather than inviting the turmoil that seems to be happening there.
Well, when you said that North Carolina was an easier job than Iowa State, like I had a little like moment of doubt there. I mean, I stepped back and you're right. You're probably right. But we have
it's not by a huge margin.
But we have to acknowledge the challenges that North Carolina is facing. And I'm going to tell you what those challenges are just based on knowledge of the situation, but also being able to read the tea leaves here. So I went to Chapel Hill in 2020, right before COVID broke out. I actually got a notification on my phone as I was leaving Mac Brown's office saying first reported case of COVID in America, just so you know. But on that trip, Mac Brown sold his vision for North Carolina, how they were going to recruit, how the state of North Carolina itself is a very underutilized state or under-recruited state in comparison to the amount of talent they had, very underrated, and that they were going to attack those players and do a very good job in Virginia and the surrounding states on top of that. And for the first 2 years of his tenure there, North Carolina did a very good job. If you go back and look at like guys like Tony Grimes, I know it didn't pan out for him in college. Keyshawn Silver, who I believe is in the portal right now. These are 5-star players that North Carolina signed that they might not have been able to sign in other areas.
Drake May, you may have heard of. Now, he was a legacy.
It's a legacy, so I think it's a little bit different.
But Sam Howell is a guy that Mac flipped on day one of having the job.
Yeah. And if you go look up North Carolina's classes, like they have gotten guys that you would not think they would be able to get under Mac Brown at the very beginning of his tenure. Now, the thing of that is interesting is if you've actually looked between the lines in the 24 and 25 classes, North Carolina is not competing on the most part on the grand scale with the teams that it was competing with, before. We are in the 2022 class. They signed 5-star defensive lineman Travis Shaw, 5-star offensive tackle Zach Rice, top end wide receiver Andre Green Jr. out of Virginia, and they're doing a very good job in North Carolina in Virginia specifically, and they're not competing against those teams anymore, the big time teams, because North Carolina, from what I understand, is not in a position from an NIL standpoint to compete financially with the types of players that they were getting before. So you've seen a downswing in the in-state talent in North Carolina, but then also their ability to go outside of state and get guys that Mac Brown was able to get 3 years ago, which makes it to me a very, very challenging job. Beautiful campus, gorgeous uniforms, Power 4 conference, difficult job. So the question with Bill Belichick is that are you put in a position, if you are an administrator at North Carolina, to understand the financial limitations of your program? And if it's funny enough, you'll go see, North Carolina basketball forums complaining about NIL, right. Which, it's not just a football thing. Like if North Carolina basketball is struggling with that, then what are we doing? Right. So do they have to go get a guy like Bill Belichick, pay him more in order to get him there to do something different so they can get the NIL discount of playing for him?
And in that way, it would make a hire like this actually closer to Colorado's Deion Sanders hire.
Exactly. And that's exactly the position they have to be in.
But this is not, I'm not saying that the Deion's, because Deion's hire has turned out to not be a stunt. Deion has been a good coach at Colorado. We were wrong about that going into this season. He proved us wrong. And the thing about it is Deion makes it so that Colorado can be in on players that it wouldn't normally be in on, that they probably don't have the resources to compete for. But being in Deion's orbit helps you from an NIL standpoint, helps you from a platform standpoint. It matters.
And he's probably going to have a Heisman winner here shortly. But here's the thing about Colorado that North Carolina does not have, and I don't think Bill Belichick has, and correct me if you disagree. If Colorado can't pay what you want from an NIL standpoint up front, in terms of guaranteed, come here, here's what you get, Deion Sanders could probably look a young man in the eyes and say, we'll make it up to you on the back end. We'll get you in an Aflac commercial, or we'll do something.
You'll be in a KFC commercial. We'll figure it out. And because he can do that. I don't know that Bill Belichick can do that. What Bill Belichick can offer is a lot of the same thing that Kirby Smart will say, that Nick Saban always said, is I can develop you to be a first-round draft pick, which Nick Saban got the Nick Saban discount early in the NIL era because he made first-rounders better than anybody else. I think Kirby Smart still gets that. I think Ohio State, I don't know, they probably don't get it as much anymore, but I think at certain positions, like if you're a receiver going to Ohio State, you probably are willing to take that over a less lucrative offer because of the first-rounders they make.
Yeah. And the good news about that, though, is that at the right place, if you usually places that have a ton of first rounders also are the places that are paying the most on the front end because first rounders are developed, but they're also recruited. So, like, you know, if you go look at Ohio State's first round draft picks, like it's just 5-star player after 5-star player too. So like it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but still like when you look at North Carolina, if they know that they are unable to compete with Georgia, Clemson, you know, other teams that are recruiting that region of the country, do you go get Bill Belichick, who can get people in a different way? And do you feel like you have to?
I don't think you feel like you have to, but I think now that you've presented him as an option, you probably need to close it. Because unfortunately, even if you make a good hire of a current college coach, if this doesn't work, your fan base is going to be like, you told us we were getting Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
This is a tough situation to be in. Like, you need him to come now because whoever you hire will seem like a letdown, even if it's a good hire. Producer River, Vol for Life goes, where's Gruden? Actually, Gruden would take this job. It's so funny that Gruden, who was the guy that every time the Tennessee job opened, that fan base was like, we got to get John Gruden. Now Gruden actually wants a college job, and the fan bases aren't clamoring for him.
Well, it's funny that you bring up Tennessee because I feel like Tennessee is like the direct reason why North Carolina is a harder job than it was 2 years ago.
Right.
Like, it's like,
and when Philip Fulmer was there, they recruited North Carolina really well too. And the thing is, like, Georgia's recruited North Carolina. Like, Todd Gurley's from North Carolina. It's always been a challenge for them to keep their best players in state. So
and also Tennessee is most aggressive, or one of the more aggressive teams in the compensation packages. So if they're going to go after the guys in this, like, Mac Brown said, North Carolina is a majorly ignored state, despite the fact that there are really good players there. But Tennessee,
I don't think it's ignored anymore.
It's not that it is anymore, but the team that emphasizes it, Tennessee, wins battles easier now. Like it. Yeah. So, well, like, what you think there's a correlation between Tennessee's financial input or financial output and North Carolina's demise from a recruiting standpoint, or is that just like you want to make a 30 for 30 on that? It's not that difficult to put together.
Well, and you also have another orange team nearby that.
Yeah, but that orange team is also limited, from what I understand. So
yeah, but Clemson's going to be less limited pretty soon here. So
yeah,
with the rev share, but yeah, as producer River points out, James Pierce is from Charlotte. That's Tennessee's best edge rusher, one of the best edge rushers in the country. Ari, we got to talk about PrizePicks, though. Our friends, the best daily fantasy game in America, they have something special for us this week. First of all, download the app. If you haven't been playing it, use the code Staples when you sign up. Play $5, get $50 instantly. This week, you get essentially a free Patrick Mahomes square. Patrick Mahomes throws for a yard, you win your square. And that's how PrizePicks works. Is you're picking squares, you pick at least two. The more you pick, the higher the potential payout. So Patrick Mahomes square, 99% off, 0.5 passing yards more than. I think he's probably going to throw for a yard. Even if he didn't, I think the Chiefs would figure out a way to win. But a game that might not feature as much passing, the Army-Navy game is this weekend. Bryson Daly's square for passing yards is 63.5. Do you think more than or less than? Here's the thing. If either of these teams are really rocking it the way they want to, they ain't throwing. So that's the question. Do you think Army is going to be as effective running the ball against Navy as it was against Tulane in the American Championship game? Because if it is, you might want to go more than 127.5 rushing yards for Bryson Daly and less than 63.5 passing yards for Bryson Daly. But I will leave that up to you as you play this weekend. Use the code Staples, play $5, get $50 instantly. All right, Ari. Because we are having to record this because of our technical issues, we fully understand that something may have already happened here. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh,
so
no,
we'll see
please.
If we can predict. We'll see if we can predict the future. And who knows? Because nothing may have happened by the time people see this. If you are putting odds on this North Carolina hire, Bill Belichick or the field?
The field.
That's what like the longer this goes, that's what I think too.
It's just because of how long it's taken. Like the portal
Right.
opened yesterday. This report came out last week. Like the timing isn't making sense to me.
Yes, exactly. Ari, let's talk about that portal because there's a lot going on in the portal. We had Lane Kiffin tweeting today, and I think people might have taken this the wrong way. He basically retweeted an ESPN story about Duke quarterback Malik Murphy planning to enter the transfer portal. And there were people who maybe haven't checked the bowl matchups yet that were assuming this is Lane trying to recruit Malik Murphy. Ole Miss is playing Duke in the bowl game. It's him basically saying, oh, the really good starter for the 9-win team that we have to play in the bowl game is not playing, and pointing that out. Because I think anybody who saw Austin Simmons take over for Jackson Dart for that one drive against Georgia, you're pretty confident that that's QB1 at Ole Miss next year.
Yeah, he looked really, really good. And I guess the real question I have for you is how many conclusions can you draw off of one drive? I guess if that drive's against Georgia, I think you can draw more, right? I don't know.
I think you can draw more, and you can also draw that they, Walker Howard entering the transfer portal is telling, because that says, oh, Ole Miss probably has their guy already. But yeah, I am curious to see what happens next. Speaking of Duke, Tulane quarterback Darian Mensah. Pete Thamel reporting that Darian Mensah is going to visit Duke. So it's just musical chairs. And I don't know where Malik Murphy goes. Malik Murphy, remember, started at Texas, had that great spring game, but obviously there's Quinn and there's Arch. And Malik Murphy did start 2 games for Texas in 2023. But he showed himself to be very good at Duke this year. I'm assuming this is a move to the SEC or the Big Ten. I'm just not exactly sure where yet.
So he's a very interesting prospect because, if you go look, he had a pretty good year this year, and Duke finished 9-3 and probably should have been ranked. And if you've ever been around Malik Murphy in person, and I think you have, right?
Yeah.
This guy is an absolute unit. He will have NFL draft analysts and scouts drooling, if not already. And the thing that is interesting about Malik Murphy, Andy, is that when he joined football in general, I think he was a sophomore or junior in high school. He got a very late start, and his physical traits made him a take for Texas, knowing that he was a project. They took him knowing that he hadn't played a lot of football. So as he has gone through his development at Texas, as he had a pretty good year at Duke, leading them to a ton of wins, by the way, if he is on the verge now at his next step of taking that experience to the next level and matching it with his physical traits, I think, and I don't know if this is hyperbolic, that whoever gets him could have a first-round pick at quarterback next year. So, this is, if you think that he can reach his potential. So, I don't know, when you say Big Ten and SEC, I agree with you. I felt like this move is a move up, right? Isn't that how you took this?
It would have to be. And so, interestingly enough, Tyler Van Dyke went into the transfer portal from Wisconsin. You remember, he was supposed to be the Wisconsin starter this year. He gets hurt against Alabama, out for the season. It sounds like Tyler Van Dyke may be headed to Duke, where he would reunite with Manny Diaz, who was the coach who signed him originally at Miami.
Right.
This is classic transfer portal dot connecting.
So do you think that Tyler Van Dyke is the response to Malik Murphy going in, or the reason for Malik Murphy.
I'm guessing response.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know where Malik is going to end up, but anybody who listened to this show or until Saturday while you and I were apart, like I was obsessed with him. You know how I get with 11 guys who have the physical traits.
Especially guys who have a great spring game. Everybody loves the guy who has the great spring game.
Well, he also, like, I thought played fairly well in his spot starts for Texas to preserve their playoff run last year.
That K-State game was a little in, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was thrilling, but they won, right?
They did.
And that was a year and a half ago. So combine the measurables and what he's physically able to do with experience. I mean, that was always going to be the thing with him, whether he stayed at Texas or not. And where would you put him? You go put him at a Wisconsin, or you go put him at a place like that, and you match him up with some guys. Maybe that would be great. I don't know. What if he went to Penn State or something? Like, that would be incredible.
And we don't know what Penn State situation. We assume it's Bo Perbula because they've been putting him into games and using him quite a bit, but we don't know that yet. So that's the tricky part with all this. Other QB news, Pete Nakos reporting this morning. We mentioned Walker Howard leaving Ole Miss. Walker Howard, according to Pete Nakos, has committed to be a Ragin' Cajun at Louisiana. So this is a guy who started at LSU, went to Ole Miss, didn't win the job, and now he's dropping down to the Sun Belt to go to a place where he can play.
Yeah. And I guess, like, when you think about the portal and the diversification of talent, you know, getting a player with physical skill sets like that to go to Louisiana is exciting, you know, and good for him to be able to play, and instead of being trapped as a second string or third string, you know, player on a really, really good football team that they'll never play at, spread it around a little bit. That's an exciting move.
So another big piece of news, and I think some of the biggest news that we're going to get in the next few weeks is the guys who are staying where they are, because retention is more important than getting that great guy out of the portal if you already have that great guy. So Dylan Stewart, the great freshman edge rusher at South Carolina, is going to be at South Carolina again next year. Now, remember, there was a story that leaked out of South Carolina a few weeks ago that said the price on Dylan Stewart's going to be in the neighborhood of $1.5 million. Well, guess what? He's staying at South Carolina, and our guy Pete Nakos reporting that the deal is between $1 million and $1.5 million. Now, that's a big gap, so we don't know the exact numbers there, but it sounds like they understood what the market was going to be if Dylan Stewart went on the open market and made sure he didn't.
Yeah. It's called big boy football. That's good.
Yeah, because if you have Lenora Sellers and Dylan Stewart, and this is the part, the transfer portal either accelerates your ascent or accelerates your descent.
Well, you saw what Kenny Dillingham said, right? Yesterday. I don't know if you saw this about, like, how he is proud of Arizona State supporters stepping up for the NIL, but that the reality of the situation is that when you are successful, it becomes more expensive, right? Because then all of a sudden you've got good players, and you need to retain those players while also replacing the ones who leave. So it's like, on one hand, you pay money to get people, you find some success, or you bring people in, and then they find more success on your team while you win. Guess what happens? They become more coveted by other teams, and it's more expensive to retain them. So, and also too, like, it's just the way that pro contracts work too, right? Like, you sign a deal. If you perform really well, then your next deal's more. Like, that's the way it works.
Well,
so
to go back to our original discussion on the show, for a lot of the Patriots dynasty, Bill Belichick was kind of the best as the GM at deciding when somebody got too expensive and when to cut bait and go try to find somebody less expensive at that position who, if you evaluate right, can give you similar production. Like, that's the thing, and that's the reason these NFL guys are now intrigued about college, because that's a skill set you're going to have in college. Because it fits right into what you just said.
Exactly. 100%.
All right. So this has been an interesting time for fandom. I get a lot of tweets about this and people saying, I love the regular season. I love the postseason. I love the games. I don't necessarily love all the transactional stuff. I also see the numbers and see that there are lots of people who do really enjoy following the transactional stuff, whether they admit it or not. Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah. And I don't think it's to the level of NBA fandom or NFL fandom, because I think the transactional piece of it, like there are certain NBA and NFL fans who are more excited about the transactions than they are the games. I don't think we're there
NBA
yet. NBA
especially, football. Andy. I think NBA free agency is a pretty important element of just fanhood in general. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like fan fiction. Like, can you create the dream up the ultimate team? And sometimes in the NBA that actually happens. So I understand where I don't think college football is ever going to get to that, where fans are more excited about transactions than the game. But it is interesting how that works. And when I start getting philosophical about fandom, I'm about to talk about Wunderfan. First of its kind college football stadium rewards app where fans earn real rewards simply by cheering for their favorite team. So if you're going to a college football playoff game, a bowl game, you need to head to the App Store, download the Wunderfan app, check in once you're at the game of the tailgate, and let your earnings grow. It's that easy. During each game you attend, you'll earn in the background once you press start. Once you have enough earnings, you can redeem for gift cards for your favorite brands like Fanatics, Dick's, Lululemon, Home Depot, and more. There are even ticket giveaways and fun contests that you can use your points to enter. Rewards are added weekly. So right now, users get 50 free Wonder are the currency within the app, just for signing up, and 40 more for using the code STAPLES. That'll score you a $10 off Fanatics code, plus a chance to win tickets to the national championship. So head to the App Store, search Wunderfan, WUNDERFAN, and start being paid for your fan loyalty. Ari, one guy who was loyal, Carson Beck, lifelong Georgia Bulldog. He waited his turn. He became the starting quarterback. He did not lead them to the promised land in his first year as the starter. He now has Georgia in a position to potentially win the national title, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to help in this situation. Georgia acknowledging that he has an elbow injury. They did not discuss the severity of it, but the way it was presented with a Kirby Smart quote in the Georgia release, which basically is Carson and his family are examining other treatment options. That doesn't sound real good.
Yeah. And they do have a bye week, but like you don't have the whole month anymore, right? But you basically do. They got
about 3 weeks. Their game is the night of January 1st. So that's the time frame here. But I would say probably need to get Gunnar Stockton ready. And I think it's interesting because it was very clear when Gunnar Stockton came into the game, and he did a good job in that game, but it was a very limited menu that he was operating from. I don't think that's a case of Gunnar Stockton doesn't know the playbook. I think that's a case of this is not a situation where you had the backup playing a lot with the ones in practice. Yeah. You had a defined starter who was the guy. And so Gunnar Stockton probably didn't have a lot of experience with the ones. Now, if Carson Beck is indeed out, Gunnar Stockton is going to get all the snaps with the ones. I would imagine the full menu is available to him when they play against the winner of the Notre Dame-Indiana game.
I also thought that Mike Bobo did a good job with designing, easy, low or high percentage plays. Like I was complaining about it during the game as we were watching. It was like, they keep running the same. They just keep throwing it behind the line of scrimmage. And it was working because they did it in different ways. It wasn't the same play over and over again. And, Gunnar Stockton took a massive hit, but also, too, the poise that he had to step up into the pocket there and get that first down with the game on the line. He set up the game-winning touchdown. Like, he won them the game. So, and also, too, we have to acknowledge this. I don't think that Carson Beck's played very well this year, at least the second half of the season. And it's not like Georgia was lighting it up on offense before he came out of the game. In fact, I think that the stat was that Gunnar Stockton's first drive, they got more yardage on that first drive than Georgia did the entire first half. So, I don't know that I believe this to be the doomsday scenario for Georgia, and the hope obviously is that Carson Beck, who's given a lot to the program and has been there for 2 years, gets healthy enough to play. You want to see these teams be at their peak themselves when they're playing in playoff games on January 1st. But at the same time, too, I think with 3 weeks to prepare either way, like Gunnar Stockton is more than capable of winning them a football game. He already did it in the SEC championship game against a very good opponent.
Well, and the thing is, they're going to see Indiana or Notre Dame. Both of those teams have very good defenses. Texas is one of the few teams that may have a better defense than both of those teams. So Gunnar Stockton's already seen about as rough as it can get in a big game. And so even though you're going to have to play a really good defense, no matter who wins that first round game, they're probably not as good as Texas's defense, which is just a compliment to Texas's defense, not a knock on Notre Dame or Indiana, because both those defenses have been awesome all season.
Yeah, no question about it. So, super excited about it. And you know what? This could just be the first page of, or the first preview too of turning the page to the future, because it looks like he might be their guy next year. So,
yeah. Well, we have to throw one other thing in there. And the last play of the SEC championship game was interesting because of this. The third string quarterback at Georgia, who becomes the backup if Carson Beck is hurt, is Jaden Rashada. And Jaden Rashada, a lot of spilt ink over his recruitment with Florida and Miami. He then went to Arizona State, which, given the rise of Arizona State and what Sam Leavitt has meant to them, is very interesting too. They didn't put Jaden Rashada in the game to do the last handoff. They put a one-armed Carson Beck in the game to hand off.
Yeah, they did. They sure did. Yeah.
So
I don't know how much you could draw from that because you're just handing the ball off. But like,
what I'm saying is, if Beck is out and Gunnar Stockton gets hurt,
yeah,
what happens then? Because you probably do have to go to Rashada at that point.
Yeah, but that's how the Legend of Cardale Jones version 2 happens. So we'll see. The hope is that, like I said this with no medical expertise earlier on, but it feels like either Carson Beck's going to play in the January 1st game or he's not playing at all. So I think that we're going to figure that out here in the next few weeks. And the hope is that he's good to go.
Yeah. It would suck if this is how his college career ends, but this is how this stuff works. I mean, you were there for that Ohio State season in 2014. And Braxton Miller is supposed to be the starter. He gets hurt in preseason camp. JT Barrett comes in. He gets hurt in the Michigan game. Cardale Jones leads them through the playoff, or Big Ten championship game and the playoff. Like you said, that's how legends are made.
When Braxton Miller got hurt before the year, it felt like someone's dog died. Everybody was this season's cooked,
Because Braxton Miller, I feel like because he moved to receiver, people have maybe forgotten what he was as a quarterback.
Good. Yeah.
He carried that 2012 team that went undefeated but wasn't allowed to play in the postseason. Without Braxton Miller, that team is what, 6-6?
Andy, if you go Google Braxton Miller highlights from his career as a quarterback, everybody freaks out about that spin move that he had at Virginia Tech in 2015. I
was on the field when that happened. Yeah.
You were there? You were that close to it?
I was on the sideline. I was standing on the sideline when that happened. It was unbelievable. My jaw just boom.
If you go look at his career highlights as a quarterback at Ohio State, it's the closest thing we've ever seen to Reggie Bush. If you go back and look at it. In terms of the subtle hesitations and the way that he made people miss, I don't think we've seen a runner like that since Reggie. So but the point is that people thought they were doomed with JT. And then JT came in, they lost to Virginia Tech, and I was like, oh God, they couldn't beat I remember Virginia Tech ran this bear defense where there was nobody over the top, and they were just stopping the run, and they couldn't beat them, couldn't score. And then they went on that run, and then they got JT injured in the Michigan game, and then I was like, oh God, the season's over again. And then they beat Wisconsin 59-0 and won the national title. So also too, Cardale Jones turned the ball over 4 times in the national championship game against Oregon, and they still won by 30, just to give you a sense of how good the actual
team was. It was a very dominant team.
It was a very dominant team from an offensive line, running back, receiver standpoint too. So in Georgia, I don't know. Here's the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I don't think Georgia has won games because of quarterback play this year. So I don't know if that's the way that they need to win games in the playoff either.
Yeah, and the one game I would say where I thought Carson Beck played his best was Tennessee. I also think that was maybe the Georgia offensive line's best game because they were also opening holes against a pretty good defense that doesn't typically get run on that much.
Yeah, and I thought that Georgia in the Texas game, like when you watch Georgia play, I mean they hit, man. Like they are a very physical, talented team.
We talked about that during the game because the Georgia defenders when they tackle you, like they're not trying to bring you to the ground, they're trying to throw you into the center of the earth.
Yeah, like Georgia isn't as explosive offensively as they've been in the past, but I also feel like they are probably the most equipped team in college football to win a game 17-13. Like there's nobody that can do it. And I think that they can do that.
The team they might see in the Sugar Bowl, though, Notre Dame, I think stylistically matches up really well with Georgia.
Yeah, Notre Dame
big physical offensive and defensive line, mobile quarterback. Like there's a lot of Georgia kryptonite in there.
And to go back to that 14 Ohio State team, and I'm going to wrap it back around. You'll see where I'm going with this. But when they lost to Virginia Tech, that was rough for them. But I'm trying to think of like low point to high point. Like if Notre Dame were to win the national title this year, can you like come up with another instance of low point during the season to high point that's more drastic than losing to NIU and then winning a title in like the same year?
That would be like Michigan losing to App State and then winning the national title. Now they did end that season on a very high note. They beat the Tebow Florida team that had, Tebow had won the Heisman. They kicked the crap out of them in the Citrus Bowl, but it's the Citrus Bowl.
Just so you know, I think I was like 23 when that game happened, and that was my first major gambling loss of my life. I bet more money than I could afford to lose that Florida would win that game because I think they were 9.5 points favorite. And
if you'd have known me, you could have called me pregame, and I've been like, "This ain't gonna happen for you." Like you could tell when the teams were warming up.
I was too late.
Not gonna be Florida's day.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Michigan beat the crap out of them that day.
And it's funny because that Michigan team probably would have had a better season despite the loss. The Appalachian State loss was bad, and then it got worse because the Dennis Dixon Oregon team came in and just dismantled them. Yeah. And nobody could stop the Dennis Dixon Oregon offense that year except Dennis Dixon getting hurt. Like,
you just said that you were on the sideline for the Braxton spin move. I was 20 yards away from Dixon when he blew his knee out at Arizona that year. I was on the sideline at that game. Yeah, that was awful.
I remember watching that. I know exactly where I was. I was standing in my bedroom. I think I'd gotten up because I thought the game was about to go to commercial, and I was heading toward the bathroom, and I realized, oh no, he's down. He's not getting up. Well, yeah, and I was a beat writer covering Florida that year, so he was the main competition for Tim Tebow for the Heisman, and I was really excited that there was going to be this fun neck and neck Heisman race, and it was going to be so much fun watching Dennis Dixon and Chip Kelly's offense, and then it was so so anti-dramatic. Just that's it, and you're so sad because that guy was so exciting.
It was like a November game, if I remember correctly, too. So it was like later in the season, and it derailed Oregon's. I can't remember. Did Oregon lose the Arizona game? Did they lose when he got injured that day? I think that's when they lost. Right?
I can't remember if they lost that game or they lost a game right after that. We'll have to look up the schedule, but it changed everything fundamentally. And obviously, Chip Kelly figured it out because Oregon, in 2 years later in his first season as head coach, winds up winning the conference. But with Jeremiah Masoli at quarterback, but that was just
they lost. They lost.
Crushing.
That was 2007.
Yeah, okay.
Is it crazy to think that game was almost 20 years ago?
It is crazy. Our friend Jeff Schwartz played in that game, and so they ended up losing 3 in a row. They lost to Arizona, UCLA, and Oregon State after that. Yeah. So
by the way,
it was just.
I know there's a lot of discourse about Oregon's uniforms, and I didn't think that I love their combo in the Big Ten title game. If you go back and look at the news stories of Oregon's uniforms back in 2007, they were sick, dude. Oregon's the green that Oregon used to wear. I feel like they don't even wear that green anymore. That forest metallic
they occasionally do, and then they occasionally go with the throwback, to the 80s. I remember covering the game they played against Oregon State in 2009 with the Rose Bowl berth on the line, and they pulled out the pure like throwbacks, the yellow pants, green jersey, yellow helmet. It was badass. But I'll tell you what my favorite one was. My favorite one was the first time they pulled out the silver chrome helmets. It was the Rose Bowl, I believe it was Wisconsin, the Russell Wilson Wisconsin team.
Yeah.
And they ran out. I'm like, there is no way this team is losing. Not in those helmets.
Yeah. No, Oregon, like there are people like the traditionalists who don't like them. I like them. The problem with them, though, is that I feel like they're kind of hit and miss. Like sometimes it's like, holy crap, those are incredible. And sometimes like, God, what are they doing?
I hate the eggshell ones. Hate them.
There's certain ones that are just like, oh, I hate those. Yeah. So, but when they hit, though, Andy, they hit. So,
Oh, yeah. When the show hits, it hits. You just have to have sound with it. So we're about to hit stop on this thing, and hopefully there will be sound. So if you hear this, if you've listened to this in podcast form or you've watched it on YouTube, it means it worked. If you don't hear this, it means that I have thrown lots of things around this room and had a hissy fit, a tantrum that I'm glad that no one is recording. Is that fair, Ari?
It's okay to have a hissy fit every now and then.
Right. Like when you lost your wallet.
Yeah.
It's in your baseball card drawer. Panini America. That's how important Panini is to Ari. Puts his wallet where his Panini is. We love you.